Hey there, SCP fans. My name is Grigory Karpin, and this is Simply Creative People, the show about SCP creatives, be they authors, artists, or offsite content creators like YouTube and TikTok. We're focused on bridging the gap between various fans and serving as an introduction to different concepts and stories on the wiki. So, many welcomes to all, and let's get started. Hello, and welcome to a much delayed 12th episode of Simply Creative People. I'm Grigory Karpin, author on the SCP Wiki, and weirdo who makes videos on the internet sometimes, but not really. And I'm joined by the beauteous, the amazing, the wonderful Harry Blank.
Oh, that's good. I couldn't settle on a joke this time, so you obviated the need to have one. Perfect.
Well, I'm always just trying to help make things move smoothly, combat your random chaos as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, smoothness is not a goal here for me.
So, how's it going?
Oh, I don't know. I'm all right. How are you? How are you, Grigory?
I'm fucking tired. So listeners will probably be aware of the fact that we haven't done an episode in a couple weeks because of many things. But most importantly, or at least on my end, is I've started a new job about 3.5 weeks ago or so, which I don't know if I mentioned on the podcast. And that's after like 18 months of being unemployed. So it's been an adjustment. It's also a fairly legal focused job. So it is detail oriented and difficult, but also very good to be back at work.
Nice.
And then, it's finally having cash and then having to spend a whole bunch of my first paycheck just on moving bullshit. It's just like, come on. But
man, I have this vague memory of money. I can almost picture what it was like having money.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah, I mean, like yourself, throughout the pandemic, I basically have been sitting on that. It's why we've both been so prolific. You more than me. But, it's been a fucking financially difficult time for a lot of people, and as much as for us as well.
Relatable.
And then adding to it, which was the pouring salt in the wound, the day I got the offer letter and was told, okay, Monday morning, show up, 9:00 sharp. I got a call, literally 5 minutes later, I got a call from my landlord saying, I'm so sorry, you haven't done anything wrong, but I'm going to have to give you your 30 days notice because I have roommates and it's a private owner. And he was like, well, I've got family. I need to move them in. And, genuinely, you've been a good tenant. And I was like, thanks, but it's cold comfort.
No kidding.
But, he was cool about it and gave me extra time because the market is crazy right now. I was so stressed for weeks just trying to find a place. But I found one nice studio, actually fairly large studio apartment, which is nice. Yeah. Anyway, so that's why there's been a bit of a delay. And it's also why we're kind of going to skip the creative talk this time. I couldn't think of anything. And honestly, I've got more packing to do. So
Simply uncreative people.
That's right. We are not creative people. Not
temporarily uncreative people.
And similarly uncreative, our topic this week was decided by poll because I couldn't decide what we were going to do. And not that I'm the only one that gets to decide. You've made suggestions too. Yeah, I think so.
That's good. That sounds like a good thing for me to have done.
I'm
proud of myself.
Thank you for being a co-host.
Hey, you're welcome.
But genuinely, that is a sincere thing. I don't want to do this by myself.
Oh, I can't express genuine sentiment. My voice just can't handle that.
Yeah, it's just, genuinely your tone just immediately turns to the facetious. I get it.
It's the only mode I have with these vocal cords.
With these vocal cords as opposed to your spare set or... Oh,
well,
silence. Wow, that was a good
joke. You should cut that one out. That's dangerous information.
Then you have a spare vocal cord set?
Anyway, so what? Serpent's Hand.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about the Serpent's Hand today. We did a poll, and that was the one that won. It looked like it was going to be a landslide, but at the end it kind of was neck and neck with the Shark Punching Center, which we will have to do. We'll have to do either next time or the time after that, because that sounds like a really fun one.
Yeah, I think I can imagine who the guest will be. And our guest this week is nobody.
Nobody volunteered. We did reach out to a few possibilities, but just didn't work out. And like I said, it's been kind of a crazy couple of weeks, so it's just the two of us this time.
How intimate.
Yes. And this is, if not the oldest GOI, one of the oldest. It's a significant presence on the wiki, which is funny because it's actually fairly obscure as well. Even though it's mentioned over and over in dozens and dozens of articles, very few of those articles, except for the GOI formats, are from their perspective, and oftentimes it's not about them. It's kind of fun. You mostly have to read between the lines and look at their viewpoint on things to learn stuff about them. Otherwise, we only have what the Foundation knows about them, which is kind of jack shit, which is fascinating because they're a big presence on the wiki.
Yes.
But, yeah, let's just get into it. So, who are the Serpent's Hand? The Super Hand. Who are the
Super Hand? Are we going to do the dumb joke ahead of time about the name? Or are we going to get that?
I'm just going to let the title speak for itself.
Yeah. I mean, I know they don't have hands. That's why they need a hand. Come on.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Actually, I just explained that to somebody. Somebody was like, I don't even get the name. Like, serpents don't have hands. It's like, all right, Captain Literal. It's metaphor because the people are the hands of the serpent.
That's right. It's important that the serpent doesn't have hands. That's the point.
Right. And I mean, I think the name is fairly evocative of the Serpent of Knowledge, right? In the Garden of Eden. But that's never really been nailed down except for in maybe Cactus's proposal. And even then, it's not necessarily just tied to the Serpent's Hand. It's this kind of metaphorical eldritch being. Which is cool because, it's more of a conceptual group anyway. They are not, organized into an army, despite how the Foundation might want to think of them as. So, on the hub, they're described as a small, which is funny because the Foundation admits they don't know much about them, so saying that they're small is like, well, wishful thinking, guys. They're a formidable org that is growing at a rapid pace and is very focused on breaching containment. They're a group of loosely affiliated cells, so the word cells immediately brings up like terrorist, in my opinion, which is too bad because these people are not, hostile to general civilians. They're not even really that hostile to the Foundation, although they are working at cross purposes.
Yeah.
Although they are very hostile to the GOC. They have different motives and operations, but they have one thing that ties them together, which is this concept that, the anomalous should be free. They don't want to just let every dangerous murder monster out, but they're very concerned with the idea of the Foundation and the GOC and others defining normalcy as this thing to keep the wonderful in check, which is something that I obviously relate to, seeing as how we wrote 6500.
Yes, well, I mean, I think for a lot of people, once you discover the Serpent's Hand, you finally go, oh, finally, here's the good guys, because the POV Foundation is definitely not.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are articles on the wiki. I haven't read literally all of them. I'm sure there are articles on the wiki that display them as the bad guys, but pretty consistently they are shown in a positive light, which is pretty fun. They are kind of unequivocally the good guys, even though they're not really trying to save lives or save the world necessarily.
Yeah, they have a holistic worldview and they value knowledge, so they're pretty hard to
reach. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like, well, no, that's pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
A lot of the cells will focus, and the ones that we hear about the most in SCP documents are cells that are really focused on breaking containment and releasing taking anomalies away from the Foundation. They've also got a big focus on magic. What's interesting is there's kind of an overlapping definition. I think some stories will focus on the fact that the Serpent's Hands are like mages, and they're so focused on magic, and other ones will be focused on the fact that these are anarchists who don't want to allow the Foundation and the GOC to define the veil and the anomalous world. But there is always kind of a tie-in to magic, or thaumaturgy, as the Foundation and GOC would like to say.
Magic is unclinical.
That's right. And along with their focus on magic, which makes a lot of sense if you think about it, their HQ is said to be, although it's hard to say for sure, the Wanderer's Library, which...
The best location.
Yeah, it is really good. Sorry, Ep. Harry's saying he likes it better than Site 87. I think that's really rude, but...
Okay, you didn't have to put me on the spot here. No. Okay, Sloth's Pit is my favorite. Man. Every episode has to be Ep Phrase Hour. It's required.
That's right. This is, I think, if it's not the first episode, it's one of the first, episodes where I don't think there's one article by
there
Ep,
isn't.
Which
there isn't.
I'm disappointed in myself, and I'm sorry.
Ip's main character and de facto pseudo-author avatar, Catherine Sinclair, was a former Serpent's Hand member. There we go.
That's true. There we go. The Foundation does not know how many members there are, or how many groups there are, or even, whether or not they all are aligned. They just sort of see them as this amorphous mass. Because it seems like the way that it is portrayed is kind of this very complicated political relationship between these different members. There's probably some that, tilt towards the more extreme, and there are others that are more reasonable. But they all have sort of that joint goal of basically fucking with the Foundation.
Yep.
One of the reasons they're so formidable, other than fucking magic, is they have access to the ways, and that's capital W ways, which, if you don't know, if you haven't looked at the Serpent's Hand hub, these are portals, effectively magic doors, though they're not always doors, that lead to other worlds. They lead directly to the library. The library has like a significant amount of ways that go into different dimensions, and some of these ways even go to other places in baseline reality. And so, like the web ways, this allows for shortcuts throughout the universe.
And how do you get a way open?
You knock.
That's right. Also with a capital. Capital right. Knock.
Which is rarely a knock on wood, although you made a very funny joke about that being the case in Inevitable.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, all my jokes are very funny. I don't even think you need to say that. You can just say, you made a joke, true. And the very that's funny true. Is implied.
Yeah, for myself, I have to distinguish between the jokes that just make me laugh and make other people laugh. I'm really only concerned with whether or not I laugh. So it's a win.
That's the secret, actually, to humor, anyway. Is to just fearlessly make yourself laugh and trust that everybody else is laughing, if not at your joke, then at the fact that you're laughing.
Right. So recently, in this time of, very busy, I haven't had that much time to be creative and write an article. And so I've been kind of putting what little time I had for being creative into doing some things for Victim on Twitter and on TikTok, voicing basically little commercials by them. And, it's getting some headway. I don't know. It doesn't matter. I'm just having fun. And a couple people asked me, well, where do you come up with these ideas? I'm like, oh, I don't know. I just laugh. If I laugh at it, then I do it.
That's right.
That's it. It's the secret. So the Foundation first became aware of the the Serpent's Hand, back all the way, and I think this might be the first mention of them, although I'm not sure, SCP-268, which is essentially a magic hat. We don't have to get into the details of it, but it's at the very end, the last addendum is that it was stolen, and in its place was left a note, "Thanks, I needed my hat back," and it's signed LS. And on the hub, it notes the Foundation is aware of the fact that at least on 2 occasions, this individual has breached containment, and it seems to be a leader of some sort in the Serpent's Hand. And there's a theory, whether or not that's true, that LS is the Black Queen, who in other places is a character named Alison Chow. And she's interesting because she's not really a magic person. but instead is somebody who can instantly communicate with her various multiversal counterparts. So she's a wealth of information, and this, you would imagine, would lead to a lot of good strategic thinking. We will probably get into her in another time, because technically the Black Queen is a GOI, although it gets a little confusing because that's just, she's an individual, but then she's a group of individuals.
Not the only one that works that way.
Right. Nobody also works that way, which is a personal favorite.
That's right. Nobody works that way except
capital N. Nobody.
The capital letter is really important this episode.
Yeah, it is. That's true. Sort of one of the more interesting things with the Hand is that they are intimately tied into a lot of the paranormal communities, those communities that are aware of the Veil and live on the other side of it, beyond just the GOC and the Foundation, because there's all these other, not just groups of interest, but little communities like nexuses, or even ones that aren't clearly stated as nexuses, that are well aware of the anomalous. And the Hand has these sort of connections and diplomatic relationships with pretty much every one of those communities. Whether or not it's always friendly is debatable, but there's a lot of interesting overlap where, you can imagine the Serpent's Hand and the Sarkics being relatively friendly, or at least on peaceable terms. But then also that could be true of, the Church of the Broken God, or, different factions within those groups, or, well, not the Davis because they're gone, but anybody that does magic and wants to have access to the Wanderer's Library will probably have some sort of relationship with the Serpent's Hand, although it's good to note that the Serpent's Hand does not control the Wanderer's Library. That is sort of its own force in the universe. And our friend Rounderhouse has a author avatar that is a giant magical bug, a centipede, like a kaiju centipede, who is the archivist in the Wanderer's Library.
Yeah, the 8th archivist, the Rounderpede. Because of Rounderhouse's administrative duties on the SCP Wiki's sister site, the Wanderer's Library, which is an excellent place to go for some literary expeditions that are not necessarily, and often necessarily not, directly SCP related, but are sort of in the same multiversal connected reality, in a sense. Because, of course, the Wanderer's Library connects to all different realities.
Right. You could read a story or write a story on the Wanderer's Library that is connected to the SCP universe, or you could not, because there's not really that expectation. It's smaller.
Pretty much the only thing you can't do is write an SCP and post it to the Wanderer's Library.
Right.
And you will be tarred and feathered, and justifiably so.
That's right. The masses of Wanderer's Library fans and authors will tar and feather you.
Now that sounded like a dig.
No, I didn't mean it as like a dig. Like there's not a lot. I mean, I think there is a lot. I don't know.
Yeah, but anyway, the Wanderer's Library site is great, and it is, I believe, somewhere on the front page described itself as the collection of the Serpent's Hand. So
yeah, it is on the front page. It's in a prominent place now where it didn't used to be.
It's a good website.
It's really cool. Website. Yeah, I have been meaning to write stuff on the Wanderer's Library for a while and just have not got around to it.
Same. I have a total of 1 article from a contest from like last year.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, famously, an author avatar of the Deadly Moose, who is a wonderful author and somebody we both are quite fond of.
Yes, indeed.
They wrote a character called Tilda Moose, appropriately enough, who is a director and is pretty frequently stated as the Foundation director of Site 19, which is this very central, incredibly important location. Kind of almost any time there's an article that doesn't want to deal with a specific site, you will oftentimes see if they decide to name a site, it'll be Site 17 or Site 19.
Yeah, Site 19 is essentially the default by virtue of being the first one created, by virtue of being the one in SCP-173.
Yeah.
Making it one of the oldest pieces of SCP lore. Yay. So yeah, that's what Dr. Tilda David Moose is the director of. Right.
And the reason that we bring Moose up, the author avatar, not the author, is that Tilda...
the author is lowercase, the character is uppercase.
That's right.
Case is very important. Yeah.
Is an ex-Hand member.
Yes.
and Moose defected from the Wanderer's Library, or defected from the Serpent's Hand, to the Foundation, and paid for it, because there are stories, in fact one we'll mention later, where Moose is, very messed up about the fact that she can no longer go into the Wanderer's Library, because Foundation is exiled from the Wanderer's Library.
For reasons which should probably be almost immediately obvious.
Right. So Wanderer's Library is all about the freedom of information and magic, and probably quite a few anomalies and artifacts, including many of their members, including their archivist, for God's sakes, and the Foundation, in an unclear, it's not like a specific story, although there probably has been somebody who's done it in more detail, when it, originally got access to the Wanderer's Library, because pretty much anyone that's in the know can get access to it, and then immediately started acting like the Foundation and got forcibly kicked out. And so now physically, if you are a member of the Foundation, you cannot actually enter away.
Yes, neither of the awful cop organizations, the Foundation or the GOC, are allowed in.
Right, but the GOC...
Except for some very small numbers of individuals.
Right, there are some mentions of that. And then there's also this aspect of terminology, which I have used quite a bit, even though I haven't written that much about Serpent's Hand. I've used a lot of the terminology that they use within their organization to kind of indicate that somebody is outside of the authoritarian Foundation or the GOC. And that terminology most commonly used is the jailers for the Foundation, because they jail things up. And the book burners for the GOC, because that's all the GOC does. Well, we've already discovered that that's not the case, but in a traditional looking way, because they occasionally destroy anomalies, the Hand is firmly against them and is also significantly hostile against them.
Yeah, if they don't own the book, they want to burn it.
Right, yeah. And I think there's also probably a lot of hostility because the GOC, as opposed to the Foundation, is oftentimes made of thaumaturges and mages, and they have their own magic colleges and all that sort of stuff. And so I would assume the two sides see, kind of a dark reflection in each other. And I think probably about the hub, the thing that I like the most, the thing that immediately drew me to it when I first saw it, was that one half of the page, and it's like in a column on the left-hand side, is from the Foundation's perspective, and the right-hand column is a kind of manifesto from the Hand's perspective, as if either organization was not aware of the fact that the other person was writing it, which is really fun.
Yes, it's a good dual perspective thing.
Yeah. Oh, somebody's yawning.
Yeah, I'm tired too. It's generally known fact among the people who are aware of my existence in the first place that my sleeping schedule is a continual disaster.
It's a fucking train wreck. Our friendship worked a lot better when mine was also in a train wreck phase. And now that I go to sleep by 11, we talk less.
Yes. Get your life screwed up again so we can talk more often.
No. Sorry. No. Instead, I just send you like a bunch of messages before noon and then wait to see what you say about them.
Yep.
And so I thought I would just read, or we could read, some of the little excerpts from the Serpent's Hand perspective, because it's really quite good. I can't remember who wrote this. It might have been Moose.
The original hub was posted by Moose, so...
Right, then I would assume. And Moose had a strong hand. In shaping, in shaping
the Moose's hand.
That's right. The Moose's hand had a strong hand.
This is a good example of laughing at your own jokes.
That's right. Anyway, one of the experts.
Mooses don't have hands.
The Moose's antler was significantly important in the forming of the Serpent's Hand.
Yes.
So now that the seriousness is completely shot,
no oxygen in the brain whatsoever. Okay,
we're gonna read some of these excerpts. So one of them is: the Serpent's Hand rose up, not out of desire nor fear, but out of clear and pressing need to keep all peoples from being chained forever in the dark.
Oh.
Here, you read the next one.
To any members of the GOC and the Foundation who may read this, We are growing so large because of you. That's hot. We were more like you once, just one more inbred secret society hoarding occult knowledge to ourselves. Not so hot.
When normalcy starts hurting the people who have to live under it to try cure a poison, normalcy itself is the poison.
To anyone willing or able to read this, this is for you. We are the Serpents Hand. We are a movement unified by a common belief that humanity and all the other peoples of the known worlds do not deserve to be kept in darkness and ignorance.
And as self-serious as all that is, it is
badass.
Yeah, undeniably like anarchist fucking punk rock, just excellent.
Yep.
And I mean, the minute I discovered them, it was like, oh, they're just the straight up good guys.
Yep.
They're fighting against an oppressive, quote unquote, government to free knowledge and magic. That wow, they are the fucking protagonists of this story.
Yep.
Which
That's
also
why they get their own spin-off site.
That's right. And, you know, appropriately enough for the first article we're going to talk about, which is Magic Orientation by the Deadly Moose, which is, one of a few pretty famous, quote-unquote, orientation tales, which are presented as a member of the Foundation, usually an author avatar, though not always, giving a presentation to a bunch of agents. And in this case, it's Tilda Moose. And in this fairly organic and believable presentation, it's not just for a series of jokes, the Deadly Moose, the author, sets up some really excellent world building and uses, and it's all diegetic because we're actually listening or reading a presentation. Even goes
pretty
into,
much all dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, and it's all from Tilda Moose, which is cool because you get these moments where she asks a question and then like responds as if, and you have to like read between the lines, which is fun. Yes. And she even does the thing of like, well, for those of you who didn't hear that, the question was, which, if you've ever been to a conference, you know what that is.
Yes, you have to sort of intuit the other half of the conversation that Tilda is responding to.
Which is so fucking common if you've ever watched a recording of a presentation. Which I have done plenty of times. You will have to be like, oh, I wonder what that was. Well, I don't know. Let's put it together with context clues.
This is just to be the oldest motherfucker in the room, even though you're older than me. This is Bob Newhart's original style of comedy, was to do half of a phone call and the audience guesses what the other half is.
Yeah. He had a really famous bit about being Abe Lincoln's press agent, which is really, really funny. Like, even now, holds up super well. Go look up that shit on YouTube. It's fucking hilarious.
He had a good one about Sir Walter Raleigh and tobacco. It's like, oh, okay, Walt. And it's like a leaf? Okay, and what do? You roll it up. Okay, why do you roll it up? You light it on fire, and then what do? You put it in your mouth?
And this is all, I assume a lot of people probably don't know who Bob Newhart is, because, he was, he was old before we were born.
And he's still old because he's still alive somehow.
Is he? Wow.
He's really old, but he's not dead.
It's in his 90s?
It improves my life. Yeah, he's well into his 90s. He's 92.
But he has this very dry, maybe not dry exactly, but yeah, very kind of quiet, kind of subdued way of telling jokes that really works because there's a lot of like very witty sort of implications to what he's saying. What's funny too is that he's one of the few, I think, from way back when, who is totally clean, obviously, because of when he became famous. Swearing and whatnot wasn't really available on stage. And then, but he's still very, very funny. Like, I feel like a lot of his jokes like hold up 100% today.
And I agree with that. And to make it less of a tangent, that is essentially how this is presented, because Moose, the character, describes herself as not much of a public speaker, and it is actually a fairly clean and tidy and humorously deadpan story about magic, which is not the kind of thing you would normally expect to be described in a complete straight-faced deadpan.
And at this point, probably on the wiki, was, not as well versed. When the wiki first started, it was mostly focused on horror and then to a lesser extent, some science fiction elements. And the magical things that were being discussed were not, magic for the most part. And so I wonder what the initial response was. It's a very highly rated tale now, but anyway.
Yeah.
No, anyway. What's fun about it is it goes into Moose will in the story is explaining how magic works, but the way that she does it is in this general enough way that it could be interpreted in various ways and still fit within a headcanon if you were so inclined to include that within your writing, which is fun because I think probably, and this is just a personal bias, but my biggest gripe with magic systems in fiction is when it feels like a rule book from D&T, I lose a lot of interest. Whereas when there is a bit more mystery to it, it should be. It's the occult. We should not be understanding the entire aspects of magic within a story, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Anyway, she says there are many, many traditions and almost no universals, unless you're talking rituals and such which are made to work for anyone. Potential, capital P, is different for different kinds of magic. One old European pagan tradition may work for you, and another originating from less than 50 miles away may not. And people like Agent Navarro, who was another famous character, don't even have a tradition in any real sense, just, in quotes, some stuff that works.
Yep.
Which is what Catherine Sinclair is like with its stuff.
Yes, and that's what the thaumaturgic characters that I have and am writing at present also have.
Although I have made a pretty significant distinction between those things in my stories.
Yep.
Although they take place in the 90s, which is how I get around it. Because the Foundation did not know that sort of thing happened. Yes. She goes on to say the Serpent's Hand is sort of the yin to the Coalition's yang. The hand are movements springing from opposition to the Coalition's whole, Big Brother thing, and to the idea of containing or suppressing the anomalous community. They're the radical activists of the anomalous community, but also the ordinary people who don't take to their equivalent of big government. Excuse me.
It seems like you would have inserted like a dig at somebody in there, but instead it was just a cough.
That's right. I was going to dig on libertarians, but I didn't. Anyway.
Sometimes a cough is just a cough.
That's right. It was just a cough. The hand takes all types. Anyone who wants to join. So there's a lot of decent folk and a lot of death cultists too. There's heavy overlap between the hand and the fringe community, obviously, plus movements like religious cults, or the occasional full-blown religion like the Church of the Broken God, and anarchist groups. Hand types tend to dislike us too, but they like us better than the Coalition because we try not to kill people.
Yes.
Which is a very, very positive view on the Foundation, in my opinion.
We try not to kill people. Yeah.
Try.
When was when was the magic orientation posted?
12? 11?
2016.
2016?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay,
so that's good. Yeah, so I was going to say, if this was published way back in Series 1, then I don't know, there's quite a few SCPs where I guess nobody got the message about Amnestics, and yeah, we just murdered everybody who saw it.
I mean, to be fair to any authors that were working on, in the site on that point, back then, it's not like Amnestics were really understood or a firmly, concrete thing, so...
it was all accrued over time as a natural evolution of the community, which is how it should work.
Yeah, it is kind of fascinating to think about a time before the concept of Amnestics was part of SCPs.
Yeah, well, it's just the way this works is people start proposing their various solutions to the various problems, and the ones that people actually think are entertaining and help them write their stories get picked up, and the ones that don't.
Yeah, and then things go out of style or stay in, or come back in style. There used to be a fairly common material that was used all the time called telekill alloy, which is really not used very much anymore.
Yeah, it was this Band-Aid thing that could block all psychic stuff, and was also used to block various kinds of magic stuff. And then the article itself was rewritten to give it so many hilarious drawbacks that it could no longer be used as the
right.
as the panacea. Because panaceas suck. Anyway.
Yes, especially in fiction. Like, oh, we just have this magic thing that cures all negative magic and psychic stuff. Well, that's not super fun.
It's all the worst excesses of the worst Star Trek The Next Generation scripts of just fire the deflector dish at it and reintegrate the tachyon flow, and that solves the episode.
Have a tachyon flow on the Star Trek Enterprise?
I was just making shit up.
Oh, I would believe it. I don't know. I don't know a lot about Star Trek.
They also make shit up.
Yeah, well, yeah. I like how hardcore fans of Star Trek, like, and they're not wrong that it is more firmly rooted in science than, say, Star Wars or other space opera type things. But they take a lot of liberties.
Yeah. I am also a fan. Yes. Well, all of the technology on Star Trek works on the principle of the television show needs us to be able to do this.
That's right.
Why do you have transporters? Because it was too expensive to show a shuttle landing every week on a new planet. That's the reason.
The idea of
glitter is cheap.
That's right. The idea of literal teleportation has always significantly bothered me.
Yes.
When they talk about the mechanics of it in that or in any other fiction where they talk about apparition or whatever, I'm sorry, so you're dematerializing? No, I'm out.
Yeah, this is our very important device. We use it constantly every day, and what it does is it murders you and then it brings you back to life somewhere else, but not really you. Anyway.
You as the ship of Theseus.
Yes, exactly.
Anyway.
The ship of Euseus. The ship of Mesius. Yes, go on. Moving right along as quickly as possible.
So,
back to magic.
SCP-2975 is another article by the Deadly Moose. I wish I hadn't said another article because it's called Another Sun.
Moose on the loose.
Yeah, these first three are all going to be moose. Because
moose.
They had a significant hand in shaping the Serpent's Hand.
They did indeed.
So, I'm just going to read a little bit of it. SCP-2975 is a demolished house on the outskirts of a city, originally built over an extensive cave system, leading to a crevasse extending an unknown depth into the Earth's mantle. A little bit later on, the crevasse collapsed because a group called the Order of the White Sun, why a white sun? Anyway, attempted to use SCP-2975 as a ritual conduit to cause an XK-class end-of-the-world scenario. And we never really find out that much about what the XK class is, unless it's in the Twine game, which I didn't take a good look at. Because of this, the Foundation decides they gotta neutralize this, and so they actually neutralized and destroyed the house. What's interesting is that a lot of the details are discovered organically through interviewing members of the community, because this house was sort of a local landmark to the people who lived there, and some people thought it was horrible, and it turns out the house
was eating people,
occasionally ate people, and this Order of the White Sun was sacrificing people. And I remember one of the persons who is interviewed is like, well, you can think worse of me, but the only reason I really got upset with them was when they started hunting and sacrificing mages. So she was all right with them sacrificing homeless people, I guess.
First they came for the homeless people.
Anyway, and one of them said, who was against the destruction of the house, but not against the stopping of the cult, which is an interesting nuance to it. If you'd left it to us to handle, we could have found a solution, a better solution. We wouldn't have just raised a living historical icon to the ground. There had to be another way. Which pretty firmly kind of speaks to the whole spirit of the Serpent's Hand. Although
it's left ambiguous whether or not they would have bothered to find another way. So there's also the question of, were they in the right? Or would they have actually done anything about this? Or was it just easier to let it eat people?
Yeah, because one of the things that I think is often left unanswered is, let's say the hand got their way, even though this is not technically the Serpent's Hand, these are people that are connected to the hand because, like we talked about earlier, they're a fairly loose affiliated group. But let's say they got their way. What exactly are they going to do with this dangerous shit? And it seems like, to an extent, the hand is really just focused on that stuff not being locked up anymore, and they don't really have plans for afterwards.
Yes.
Anyway, what's really
in
fun...
any event, yeah, go on. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, as you alluded, it ends in a game in the Twine System, which is a sort of a choose-your-own-adventure, pseudo-text adventure sort of thing, where you can read certain amounts of text and then click a link to choose what you choose to do, and you can see the story of how the house was neutralized from the perspective of the mobile task force sent in to deal with it. And it's really good, has some really fun details and information on the cult, but I think it's best if you experience it yourself because there's multiple options.
Yes.
This is something that a lot of people have done. There aren't like hundreds of these, but there are several SCPs using Twine to do this interactive fiction. I know Ip's done it. Dave You Fool has also done it. So.
Yeah. Ip's 5K entry was one of these.
5,500, right?
Yeah. Although I've heard,
and he hated doing it.
Yeah, he's not fond of it, but I think it turned out pretty fucking amazing.
Yes, and I think the numbers bear that out.
Yeah, it's really very impressive because it is a significant Twine game. It is not something you can play in 30 seconds. Not that it'll take you 6 hours or anything, but anyway, another one by Deadly Moose is this excellent series called the Serpent Sequence, which is housed on the hub under the Collected Tales tab, and it starts with a tale called Prisoners. And one of the fun things about this is that it solidifies that connection between that figure LS and the Black Queen as sort of a, I say in the outline, de facto leader, but it's unclear exactly how the Black Queen is leading the hand. It seems like a interesting political situation, to say the least. Certainly somebody who has a lot of influence. And I think, I don't know exactly what the history, but this does a really good job of humanizing not just the hand and the Black Queen, but also like the library and people that exist in and around that world. And kind of shows things from a very fairly grounded perspective, even though it's a story about magic. And even though there's a bunch of LOL Foundation characters in it. But
it's a Moose thing. Moose likes to do the big narratives with the sort of curating the main storyline, so to speak, of the Pandora's box and all that stuff, and all the author avatars from that era, and carrying it into a bigger story. And it's one of the things that Moose writes about so much that they ended up having to help organize the Resurrection canon that does this. This is basically proto-Resurrection.
And thank God they did, seeing as how we are still having fun playing in that sandbox.
Absolutely. Moose is great, anyway.
Yeah.
Can't go wrong with Deadly Moose.
Yeah, I've never read an article by Moose that I didn't like.
Same.
Genuinely.
Absolutely. And I'm not just saying that because Moose is an admin.
On staff. I'm also not just saying that because we still want to be involved in Resurrection, not just our side thing.
Yes.
Not that I think they are listening to this. But anyway.
Yes, probably not, but we don't know. Hi, Moose, if you're watching. If you're watching, I don't know how because it's audio.
I do put them on YouTube eventually.
What would you have for pictures? Just your face and your Patreon?
My face and my Patreon, which does not exist. Yes, I would. Yeah, my face is definitely not on there. I just usually use
a link to your legal practice.
Usually just use the very boring, but use the image of the podcast art that Salty Water did for us.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it is great. Anyway, we're going to switch tacks here because we also have a couple of articles by Zin, who is another legendary, long-term author and admin. I think admin. But
yeah, definitely. If you've ever been accepted to the SCP Wiki, your application was accepted by Zin.
Probably.
If you've ever had to have your post collapsed because it was too long to be read on a phone, it was collapsed by Zin. Zin does an absurd amount of the work that most people would not want to do. The site rests on Zin's shoulders, and also I've never read an article by Zin I didn't like.
Yeah, and Zin is almost always incredibly diplomatic, even though Zin is constantly having to basically tell people that they have screwed up. But is
hardworking, good-natured, great author. Good person.
But I genuinely want to give credit for the fact that I don't feel like I'm ever being talked down to by Zin, even though it could very easily devolve into that with somebody else.
Yep.
Anyway, we love you. This article is 2175, and it's called "Are You Going?" And it's a localized phenomenon.
Going?
Yes.
You have to sing it.
I don't think it's that song.
Well, it is, because it's actually excerpted at the end.
It's "Are You Going to San Francisco?" Because that's what I thought you were singing. Oh.
That's if you're going to San Francisco. No, this is "Are You Going to Scarborough Fair?"
Oh, well, I don't even know that song. Okay. Well, I'm just glad it's not the terrible fucking hippie one.
That's a good song. Screw you.
It just sounds like something my father listened to. Anyway, so SCP-2175, yeah, we invented hippies. Anyway, is a localized, that's why we're sick of them, is a localized phenomenon that manifests on Windsor Bridge, connecting the towns of Windsor and Eton in Berkshire, UK. At irregular intervals during dawn and dusk, so not that irregular, documents of varying content and length will appear on the pedestrian walkway of the bridge. These items are collectively designated as -1s. Instances of -1s are various notes, reminders, and collections of miscellaneous information. The anomaly was discovered following the interception of a message which determined the Windsor Bridge to be a rendezvous point for the members of the Serpents Hand. Diagrams in a personal vignette confirming hand activity were later obtained from an initial investigation of the bridge. The anomaly is currently believed to be caused or maintained by members of the Hand, who may actively use the phenomenon to facilitate exchange of information at the location. Though the Foundation has yet to directly intercept a Serpents Hand member at the bridge, it is confirmed that the members of the group are presently aware of the Foundation investigation.
Mm-hmm.
What's fun about this is if you're reading between the lines, which the Foundation is completely unaware of, and Zin confirms it in the context, this is a way. This is, capital way. It is this, like, magical thing that the Foundation is only able to see from the outside and just goes, we don't know how it works.
Yes, because they can't get in because they're Foundation. Because it ends with a little poem that basically goes, like, unless you're friends, you can't come in, and the Foundation's not friendly.
That's right.
And the little poem references the song that you haven't heard because you're a Philistine.
That's right. I just have better taste in music.
I'm
kidding.
It's most famously done by Simon and Garfunkel. Okay.
Jesus, more hippies. Anyway, I'm kidding. God. I'm kidding. No one who listens to this podcast is even aware of who Simon and Garfunkel is, and the only reason that's
extraordinarily unlikely.
They've probably heard the name, maybe. And they maybe heard the songs on like a movie soundtrack, but didn't know who the band was.
Yes, I'm sure most of the people watching this, even if they're the 12-year-olds that make up most of the SCP audience, have only heard 6 or 7 Simon and Garfunkel songs in their life.
Right, well, that's not what I'm saying, is that they probably were not aware of it, because, this is one of those bands that is like, prevalent in pop culture, and yet, it's not like people are running out to buy, the greatest hits of, necessarily. The youngish people, I mean. The only reason I know who that is because my dad was like a hippie, and now is a Republican, which I feel like a lot of hippies went that way. Anyway.
One more reason to hate the hippies.
That's right. Fucking Birkenstocks. Clack, clack, patchouli.
This has devolved so fast. It's amazing.
Fucking hippie. I'm just kidding. I don't have any real feelings about hippies. Anyway, SCP-5233, also by Zin, which is fun. We're not really going to summarize it because I just kind of want people to go and experience it, but shows something that Zin is very fond of doing in their articles, which is insects. Bugs.
Zin loves bugs.
Which is why
especially
the Butterfly Squad is called the Butterfly Squad, because Zin heads that up.
Yes, indeed.
And for people that don't know, the Butterfly Squad is a group of volunteers who crit on the wiki forums. I used to be heavily involved, and now I'm not, just because I kind of did so much of it for about a year and a half that I got burned out.
Zin seems desperately attracted to all of the work that is difficult and thankless. Mm-hmm. And crit on the forums is definitely one of those. It's
also exhausting.
Yeah.
Shout outs to Fabled Tiefling, who does an amazing job.
Yeah.
And sometimes gets shit for it. but I don't like that, and I really like Fabled in general, and also really like their crit.
Absolutely.
So a really fun article, and we were only somewhat described. It was I think it was JamCon 2014. This is one of the entries. Is SCP-4964 a bootleg DVD of the Shaggy Dog by Gishface?
Gishface. I love this article.
It's an incredible article. It's super funny. I'm honestly surprised reading it that it's not a Debut Fool article.
It reads like a Debut Fool. It reads like a Totally Soft article.
Yeah.
Like Dog a Movie.
Yeah, it totally does. And Gishface, if you haven't heard of, only wrote like 10 or 12 articles, but has some real bangers in there. So go look them up. This one is clearly one of the biggest ones for me. I really, really like it because it, first of all, is utterly absurd and pretty funny, but also kind of this like thin vein of like threatening, like ominous tone, which is fun.
Yes.
Anyway, the first lines are SCP-4964 is an anomalous DVD purporting to be, like it claims to be, purporting to be a copy of the 2006 film, The Shaggy Dog. The movie on the disc follows the normal plot of the film up until approximately the final 15 minutes, at which point it shows a radically different ending. And then what follows is, I mean, there's more details than that in the description, but what follows is a really phenomenally weird series of test logs which just kind of describe the ending shown and then what the Foundation did about it. And a couple of those reference the Serpent's Hand, so I thought we would read those. The first one, which is dated 12/23/2008, the ending shown is, the film proceeds up to the point where David is supposed to throw the bailiff's baton, at which point David says, "Wait, this isn't," and then the scene cuts to a mystical Tibetan collie waking up from a nap. It yawns, and then, in Tim Allen's voice, says, "What a weird dream," before getting up and trotting towards a hooded figure in a lab coat standing in a stone archway. The camera zooms onto the archway to show a Serpent's Hand insignia carved onto its side, then zooms far out to show a large mountain range. Based on this shot, it was determined the scene takes place on the peak of Kachinjunga? I probably said that wrong. A mountain in the Himalayas. As the camera stays on this shot, one of the two mountains cracks in two.
Yep.
Notes/actions taken. Following this new video, the Foundation mounted a fact-finding expedition to the mountain. Heavy seismic activity in the area made climbing hazardous and resulted in the loss of one agent. Upon reaching the peak, an abandoned base built into the side of the mountain was discovered. Enough evidence was discovered there to conclusively show it was constructed and used by the Serpent's Hand, although what it was used for and why it was abandoned remains unclear. You want to read the next one?
Yeah. 02/22/2009. Because these are the endings that happen every time they are watching the movie on different dates. In the courtroom scene, the bailiff has been replaced by the hooded figure in the lab coat. When David attempts to take his baton, the figure easily wrests it back, then pulls off his hood and turns directly towards the camera. His uncovered face matches that of Dr. Anton Forrester, a known high-level Serpent's Hand operative. In Tim Allen's voice, Forrester says, "Stop this. Your incompetent meddling is making this all worse for everyone. We're doing the right thing here, and if you can't see that, well, you'll see soon enough. They deserve to be free, all of them, and we'll crack the earth to get them out, if we have to." The movie then ends. And then the notes. After a protracted series of raids and counteroffensive, for full mission details and casualty reports, see Operation Log 4964-27-3, the Foundation managed to capture Dr. Forrester and interviewed him at length about the Serpent's Hand's plans. He denied all knowledge of the ongoing seismic events and of the Shaggy Dog, which he claims to never seen. Believable. Very believable. Having held on to these assertions steadfastly through multiple forms of enhanced interrogation, it is currently believed that he's being truthful in this matter. So yeah, this movie apparently is capable of precognition about the Serpent's Hand.
And of like ostracizing the Foundation, which is fun. Also, I like the implication that the idea that someone has not seen this movie is more unbelievable than anything else that they witnessed in this log.
Obviously, everybody's seen The Shaggy Dog with Tim Allen and Robert Downey Jr.
I have not seen this movie.
Neither have I.
Yeah, I don't. Why would I watch that?
It's not good. I know I've seen parts of it as a kid, and I know that it isn't good.
I mean, no shade Well, no, all shade. Tim Allen's in it. That's a big sign that I don't want to watch it.
Yes, unless we're talking about Galaxy Quest, it's definitely negative.
You're right. That one's pretty good.
That's the one thing that until he started his more recent career, Galaxy Quest was the one thing that made Tim Allen okay.
Oh yeah. Also, I guess Toy Story.
He's since used up all that goodwill, but yes, Toy Story.
Toy Story's also pretty great. Anyway, the next article is "The Gallows Tree" by Lavender Bloodstains. Yeah, that's an author name.
That's a good name. I like that name.
Yeah, it sure is. If your bloodstains are leaving behind lavender shaded colors, you should see a doctor.
I think Klingons have lavender blood.
They do. Anyway. At least I think they do. Actually, I don't know. Anyway, this is a really fairly underrated article. I think it's at 30.
The phrasing. It's a fairly underrated article. I mean, it's not good, so I'm glad that it's underrated. It's fair.
I meant
it's an underrated article, and yes, it actually should be much higher. It's at plus 31 now, which is honestly a crime. So read this and upvote it, you bastards.
Yes, it's really, really good. And for that reason, we're not going to go into deep descriptions of it because I want people to go and experience it, and it's fairly short. But it's
it's a Serpent's Hand format. I hadn't noticed this because I guess I was reading in a hurry. I didn't notice the Serpent's Hands formats that are describing objects or people or whatever always have a list of pseudonyms, and I didn't read the list of pseudonyms until now. So I just want to read that. Yeah. The Gallows Tree, Deirdre, the Vengeful Dryad, the Whomping Willow, but kind of hot.
Yeah, there is kind of a subtext to this that people want to fuck it.
So have we done a Serpent's Hand format yet?
No, this is the first one.
Should we background how these are done?
Yeah. So these are which is kind of funny because they're documents that imply that there is more of a set archive, but they're done in such a way as to undercut the seriousness of the subjects oftentimes, because the footnotes are people arguing with each other oftentimes. If they're not arguing, then they are saying something funny. And it's almost like people are communicating, but only by footnotes. And so oftentimes at the end of a sentence, you'll see like 3 footnotes. And they're just
where they're
discussing to each other. Yeah.
I think that I think that this is a technical limitation, and I think what it is meant to represent is people scribbling in books that have been passed around by a bunch of people, and everybody else is writing marginal notes, and they're arguing with each other like it's graffiti in a bathroom. Yeah.
I mean, but, the Wanderers Library does have technology, so it could also be like, this is a wiki that the Foundation, or I'm sorry, the Serpent's Hand, uses amongst, a shared database or whatever.
Yes, I suppose that's possible.
But, either way, the point is that oftentimes the meat of the article, the vast majority of the content is done in a fairly serious tone about some magical item or event or person or creature. And then, I can't think of one that isn't like this, except for one that's like a part of Immemorial Aditum, which is really, really dark. Otherwise, all of them are, incredibly humorous, but only when you look at the footnotes. So if people regularly don't look at footnotes, then they're missing out on half the fun of these articles.
Yes.
But this one's about the Serpent's Hand. It's a GUI document of the Serpent's Hand, as we've discussed, and it kind of plays into the trope, like we talked about, where, and this is a consistent thing. I can't think of any of the articles where this isn't the case, where people are having a conversation in the footnotes. And this one really lays into the whole humor aspect of it, and it's there's a lot of very funny moments to it. But essentially, what this is,
it's like almost a sideways thing from the Parawatch documents, where you'll get the main post where the person's telling the story, and then the idiots chime in the replies.
Papa squat, Papa squat,
Papa squat.
That technically wasn't Parawatch. Anyway.
No, it was something else beyond.
Spirit. This is a spirit of a Celtic witch haunting a tree and, killing people. But what could have been just a simple murder monster is actually really funny, kind of horny, but not in an adult way. Like there's no explicit stuff in this. It's more just kind of tongue in cheek.
Just one of those footnote guys is really, really interested in this giant tree lady. Especially because she's giant and she's killing people. He's really into that.
It's really funny. And so it's honestly a crime. This is only a 30. People go read the Gallows Tree.
Yeah, it's a great article.
Another article by Zinn and another GOI document is a love letter to a lady mantis. Bugs, again.
Bugs.
But this one is pretty interesting because, first of all, it starts with a pretty excellent poem, which I guess I'll read. I don't like reading poetry, but if
you don't like reading poetry, are you just protesting too much? Do you actually really want to read it?
You can read it if you want.
Because I don't mind reading poetry, but if that was just you pretending not to like to read poetry, you can read it.
No, it's not that I don't like reading it. I don't really feel like I ever read it out loud very well. So go for it. You do it.
She walks in light and hunts the dark, a lady mantis, calm and keen. Her arms aloft and visage stark, she strikes with blades, but half-blink seen. A crafter taught by fray and foe, duelist heart and courtly charm, her past an epic tale untold, her name a threat to cause alarm. Such beauty, grace, and steel-sharp wit inspires fire within the soul, to turn back fear where shadows flit, seek but to seize, achieve her goal. The Lady Smith of Redmark Knife, she has no equal in this life.
And if you didn't, kind of pay attention to the subtext of that poem, this is about a lady mantis in this manted court, which is, something out of like a fantasy novel or Hollow Knight, where it's a society of bugs. Although she is 157 centimeters tall, so that's a pretty big mantis. And
that is a really big mantis.
And I don't want to meet her because no, thank you. And this high society, which is implied by the fact that they're writing poetry about her, and a duelist culture of this, literally a society of mantises. And I don't really want to say more about it because I want people to go and read it. It's
got a good sense of humor.
It's got a really good sense of humor. Like almost all the GOI documents of Serpents Hand, like I said, the footnotes again are establishing the members of the Serpents Hand kind of perspective on these very serious epic duelist life, and is just this really funny. All of them are, honestly. I would almost be afraid to write one because you have to be a very specific sort of witty to do it. You should do one.
Yeah, well, I might. Every time I read one of these, I feel like writing one. They're a lot of fun.
Yeah.
This one's also very special because it has a poem in it, and the poem obeys proper meter. And
it does.
And that's like half of everybody has a strong urge to use poetry at some point, and about 10% of those people obey the meter correctly, and I don't think they even know that they're not doing it correctly, and this does, so that's quite nice.
Yeah, I have...
It's nice when you read a poem and it has the correct number of syllables.
I have twice made poetry part of something I'm writing and needed help from someone else because of the meter.
Some people just don't have the ear for it for some reason.
I definitely don't. But thank God you helped me out with that one, and then Lord helped me out and just co-wrote the thing with me for Victim because I was just like, I don't know how to do. Do you know how to do this? Great. Can you just do it? Here's what I wrote. Turn that into pretty. Which he did. It was amazing. Anyway, the next one, which is by N.A. Epic, or Epic?
I always say Napic, but I don't really know.
Yeah. Who's another fairly well-known author, and I have never, ever read anything by Napic that I haven't thought was hilarious and or pretty original. And this one, I don't know what the original title was, but has been renamed because of popular consent, apparently, from the comments. Rock War! Rock War! Rock War! Rock War! And I have to say, this is my favorite Serpents Hand GOI document. This is
real good.
Fucking ridiculous. So in the list of pseudonyms for this article, there is also a statement that just says Stonehenge versus Easter Island. Like it's a wrestling match, which is pretty funny. And it starts with, in the year of defilement 42-343, certain gods desired entertainment, but found themselves in a conundrum. They desired something exhilarating, something akin to the gladiator duels of Rome, but they wanted the spectacle to be far grander. On the other hand, these gods disliked the bloodiness of such duels, believing it to be too barbaric of a sport. And so, they founded the Colosseum of the Gods, a colossal arena housing 5 tribes of monoliths. The creators, whom we deemed the hypocritical Highlanders, stuck to the laissez-faire approach to their monoliths. Just
Rock war.
Fucking hypocritical Highlanders, which is a phrase that is said 15 times in this article, and it never stops. It never fails to make me laugh. Like when I was reading this again, this is not the first time I've read it. And I just stopped every time to kind of chuckle myself because it's such a dumb term.
These hilarious faux Serpents Hand titles that are just taking the piss out of the Serpents Hand having their own title for everything. And even the footnoters are like, where are you getting the goddamn names from?
Yeah, the footnotes in this one are almost playing the straight man, as opposed to many other Serpentine documents where the straight man is the main text, which is a fun reversal. And one of the aspects, so the Serpent's Hand, I don't remember all the different parts, but often we'll go into their equivalent in the description, and then like different aspects of it, and then history, and then first-hand accounts. And one of the first-hand accounts, which that's not what they call it in there, in this article is, all right, so here we fucking go. So you ever read those books where people are put in I think it's supposed to say arena, and forced to kill one another? Hunger Games or Battle Royale, doesn't matter. The point is, it's not like that. That shit is boring. Unless you're lucky enough to watch an indolence ram into dumbass standing in front of it, you're better off watching the spectators smite the book burners for trying to force their way in.
Yeah, the article has more interest in the culture around the arena than it has in the actual arena, which is apparently just rock people running into each other.
Because it's gladiator games without blood. So it's just, and as I said, 5 tribes of monoliths. So these are just big stones.
Yep.
Or potentially
I hope they at
buildings.
least drew faces on them. Anyway, that line was from somebody named Nevrin Faligan, which I suppose in retrospect probably has to be an Epic's author avatar in this case.
Yeah, I think so. Anyway, like all these, we're not reading a lot of them because we think that they should.
They're all really good. I'm gonna shout out one later on, but they're all really good and they're all fun to read.
Yeah, the fun thing about the Serpent's Hand is, as I said earlier, they're still a fairly obscure group because almost none of these articles, except for maybe the magic orientation, really even talks about the hand or the way that magic works. Instead, it's almost all from their perspective looking out, and half the time their perspective is like, whoa, cool, that's weird. Which is great. But in a shifting tone, a little more serious, and by a little, I mean a lot more, SCP-6000, which is a fairly well-known article, but it's kind of hard not to bring up in this topic, by Rounder House. And this is like a no-brainer. I mean, not only did it win 6K for a good reason, not just because Rounder House is a popular author, but it's like wildly good.
Yep, it's a great article.
It's a terrific article. And it's epic as fuck, like a lot of the the KCON entries that win are. But this one is all from the perspective, and it's actually a wildly personal story from the perspective of Moose, because there's this wider kind of disaster that's happening in the world where where yet again something is happening in the Amazon. For 6K, there were a lot of things happening in the Amazon. Our good friend Marcellus Raines also wrote something called The White Ashes, which also involved the Amazon.
Oh.
I'm trying to think. There was at least another third big.
There was
big
at least
one
more, and I can't think what it was. Yeah.
Well, sorry to whoever that was.
But then again, there were 100 entries in 6.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it was hard. I actually did read all of them, but that was difficult.
I didn't.
I did, but I did not do
I
that.
read a lot of them.
I did not do that for DepCon because I was so busy. Anyway, this is kind of less about Serpent's Hand, but by context, it is about the Serpent's Hand because it's all about Tilda Moose's relationship with the library and wanting to be back in that world, in many ways showing sort of a theme of regret in her life of moving to the Foundation. Maybe she thought it was the right thing to do and still thinks it is, but really regrets the loss of not just the library, but magic in general.
It ties into his original 001 proposal about how Moose basically spends the rest of her life upset that she never got back into the library, and this is a sort of a realization. Although it takes place in an alternate universe, so it doesn't necessarily happen in the main one, because that's everybody's favorite K-Con trick.
Does happen fairly often, yes.
This hasn't happened yet, but this file just sort of appeared. Yeah. That's the only thing I don't actually like about this article. The rest of the article, I think, is an absolute banger. It's great.
I don't dislike it, but it is unfortunately a very... I think what happens is when people want to write these big, landmark events, they then wonder, oh, well, if at the end the world's over, where do we go from here? It kind of ends the story. Except for 2000, which, did the opposite.
Yes.
Literally.
But yeah, anyway, I think just reading this originally while creating it, it was like, this is probably the winner.
Yeah.
This is going to win. This is good.
I mean, I also crit it, and I feel like I told him, like, I think because he's like, well, what do you think? And I'm like, I think I'm mad that you wrote this.
Yeah. I was like, oh, man, I don't think we're going to beat this.
No, yeah. I mean, especially once... God.
Especially once we realized it was going to be 45,000 words long, yeah.
And then we decided, fuck it, let's double that.
Yeah, we just... I think part of critting 6,000 was part of the reason I was like, you know what, guys? It doesn't fucking matter. Let's just go whole hog and go big, because we're not winning anyway, so let's make it as crazy as possible, because it's going to be Roundhouse who wins.
Yeah, that and, like... Place made, and I remember when he was on, we were talking about how, like, I was really resistant to it at first, because big change like that, I tend to be a little bit of a stick in the mud, but Place was the one that really made the point that, like, this is so fucking audacious that, like, even if it doesn't get us more votes, like, isn't it just worth doing? And it eventually...
the making it 95,000 words long thing that Place has suggested,
To be fair, we did not have a number in mind, but it did end up being roughly twice the length,
Yep.
Anyway.
At that point, the contest had progressed far enough that it was very clear that 6,000 was going to be either Rounderhouse or Cactus.
Right.
Which, depending on how you look at it, was going to be the result anyway.
Probably.
But,
yeah. I mean, K-Cons
I have certainly no qualms with what won, because this article is terrific.
Yeah. 6,000 is fucking wonderful. Like,
it's an epic
and I'm not just saying that because I like
story.
Rounder, and I'm not just saying it because I want Rounder to come on to talk about Chicago Spirit. Like, I genuinely fucking love this article.
Yep.
But, like all of these, I think you should just go fucking read it, because other than knowing it's a very personal story about Tilda Moose and the library, I think the rest of it is just a pretty fun series of revelations.
Yep.
It's
a good epic adventure story.
And it's like an emotional kind of arc. And it ends in I think it's probably one of the best endings for, like, a big article on the site.
Oh, the ending is fantastic.
It's just out of this... Like, I get, like, warm feelings when I think about it. Like, I'm not just trying to butter you up, Rounder, but, like, goddamn. Anyway.
Yes, I think pretty much everybody who read it for him looked at the ending and went, yeah, that's how this ends.
Fucking bravo. Anyway, all right, moving on.
Moving on. That's enough second Rounder off.
Yeah, fuck you, Rounder.
Seriously.
My favorite Serpent's Hand stuff that I haven't written is Of an Endless Hunt, which, it's by Rumetson? I didn't say that. Rumetson, who's also a fairly well-known author on the wiki, although is not around anymore.
Another admin of the Wanderer's Library.
Yes. And is... So when I was kind of worried about how to interestingly tell a story about the Serpent's Hand in Vanguard and setting up Vanguard in the Emissary Path, Locke suggested I read this series of articles because it's all about the Serpent's Hand as a group of people. It's about the Black Queen. It's about kind of not just humanizing them, but setting them up as, like, an interesting force within this universe. And, there's a couple things that hold me back from recommending it, and the problem is that it's not completed and probably never will be. Although I would love to see it completed. I still think it is fucking wonderful. And I have 100% taken the main character of this article and will be making part of Vanguard, and have already done so because I just love this character so much.
Hooray.
What?
I said hooray.
So it follows a young girl named Amy who is, and I use quotes because it's a little bit unclear, possessed by the Witness. Again, capital letters, the Witness. A perfectly observant, non-corporeal being that's like trapped in her head but can see everything around her. So it's not just being able to see through her eyes. It's also like can see things that are behind her or see things that are like slightly out of sync with reality, can like understand knowledge to a level that like makes it almost seem like this thing has a hard line to the Wonders Library itself. But she gets no powers from this. It's specifically that this thing knows so much that is able to like advise her, sort of like Otacon in Metal Gear Solid, talking to Snake. Only Otacon is useless. And at the beginning, she is contained. She is contained by the Foundation because she's this, an individual who is experiencing an anomalous event who cannot just be anesthetized. And she gets freed by the Serpents Hand because the Serpents Hand specifically wants to get her out and use her. And I say use her, but like recruit her to essentially take on this mission to help the Black Queen. And it also serves as like an expansion on that magic system that Moose talked about in the magic orientation. But as much as it is an uncompleted story, I cannot recommend it enough. The character work here is off the charts. And because of that, I have a significant, soft spot in my heart for the Black Queen and for Amy. And it's just really fucking good. And then Flops, Lieutenant Flops, our friend and very good author, who just wrote with Lord Stormfish a fucking incredible new article, 6705, I think. I'll include it in the description. But recommended that I check out the Korean branches version of the Serpent's Hand, which is, I'm probably going to say this wrong, so I apologize, Dinodon's Hand. Dinodon. Which is a much more organized kind of administrative version of the Serpent's Hand, because their hub, which will include the link to on the international wiki, so it's in English, breaks down like their creed, their history, their organization, the founder, and it's like incredibly more concerned with world building. It's like the direct opposite to Serpent's Hand core hub, which is really, really fun and kind of serves as a companion, because if you think about it, this is just one of those cells, and they are specifically concerned with the world from their perspective.
And they're anarcho-syndicalist, meaning they've got a sort of a communistic group philosophy of working within the system to improve the lives of people. So they've got a fuck the power thing going on, which is nice.
Yeah, and there's a few articles from their perspective on the Korean wiki. Unfortunately, I don't think a lot of them have been translated, but one that has been is the Millenary Nine-Tailed Fox by Salamander 724. And this is essentially an SCP, which is fairly famous for being essentially a horny takedown of furries, SCP-953, and adds like a tremendous amount of like humanity. And there are, it's kind of rough. There are some problems with the language, and I assume that was, somewhat to do with translation. But it's really, really good because this is about this immortal, like, demon fox that can look and sound like a woman, and alter people's perceptions, and interbreed with people, and then adds like so much more, because this is not just about like fox lady hot. Like, it's not just like an anime thing. Like, this is like this really interesting perspective that goes into like their history, their shared history, because their spiritual forefather, who was a person named Featherman John, which is amazing. Not John like the white person John, as Jean, I think, which is a Korean name. she claimed to be like 1,000 years old in 1515. But then, like, several years later, Featherman is able to imprison her during like a horrible battle in which he ends up dying. Like, it's like such an epic thing in a pocket dimension called Peach Blossom Land, which is really cool.
It's a Korean and also I believe Chinese paradise. I referenced that in that Arcadia tale that we talked about last time in my Password series. It's what the Arcadia spinoff is named after, the Peach Blossom.
Yeah, and it's also linked.
I just suddenly for some reason decided to talk about myself in the middle of this.
This is good. That's good. But it's also, when it's linked in this article, it's linked to SCP-15. Ugh, God, can't speak. SCP-159-KO, which is a Korean SCP on the branch, and I believe that one's been translated as well. And it is.
I should say at this point, for anybody who wants to look at the Korean wiki, I looked at it a lot for my Password series, and the nice thing about the Korean wiki from the perspective of us filthy Anglos is that Google Translate does not do an altogether reprehensibly poor job with Korean, even though you would expect that Asian languages would turn out as gobbledygook in Google Translate's garbage algorithms. Korean actually comes through fairly well, so you can read some stuff on the Korean wiki, and you should, because they are good.
Yeah, I would also say the same about the Japanese wiki, because I've done a little bit
Absolutely.
of that. I've done a little bit of that myself. And there's a lot of good stuff on both those branches. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff on all the branches, but those are the two I've actually taken time to look at. And what's fun is this is like this article is from the perspective of one of the international branches version of the Serpent's Hand, but then also fits, at least in my head, as just canonically one of the Serpent Hand cells, which is the way that it works. You could, when people are like, what is the Serpent's Hand like? It's like, well, I mean, what do you want them to be like? You can like tell it completely, as long as they're not interested in containment and they're not pals with the GOC, I think you are pretty much free to do whatever the fuck you want, which is fun.
Pretty much.
So this is probably going to be a fairly shorter article, episode, because I still have packing to do. But I did want to hit like a lightning round, kind of hit 4 or 5 articles to talk about.
I'm going to throw one in there at the end too.
Cool. One of them is The Last of the Hand by Malverick 1, which is a perspective story in the events that made in the alternate universe that where SCP-5000 occurs, which if you haven't read it, which, you should probably go read that. It's
If you haven't read it, who are you?
Yeah, you should. If you like SCP, you should probably read SCP-5000. It's pretty fucking
deeply
good.
Underrated, low-rated article. Not very well-known article, SCP-5000.
Yeah.
What's it at now, like 45,000 or something?
Yeah, it's doing all right.
It's doing all right.
And in that article,
if you want to read this obscure article, you could use the fully illustrated graphic novel version of it. Or
is there?
Anyway.
Is there?
Yeah, there is.
Wow, that's cool.
I can't remember who did it. If it was Tunisia who did the Corbinic art for Inevitable,
sense.
I think it might have been. But anyway, yeah.
God, Tunisia's
5000 does not.
Also,
I know.
Go look up Tunisia's Twitter because their art is fucking awesome.
I won't commit to that having been Tunisia. It might have been Dr. Doberman. It's somebody who's fantastic.
Oh, you know what?
So many
think
fantastic
it was
art.
Dr. Doberman. Anyway,
it might be Doberman.
They're
all amazing.
Also, look at Dr. Doberman's art because also
we'll
amazing.
have to do a whole thing on the art eventually because we have so many amazing.
Yes,
artists.
And also we're friends with some of them.
Yes, we are.
Okay. Anyway, this is a world in which 5000 is taking place, and 5000 is basically something has happened to the Foundation that makes them want to kill all of humanity.
Yep.
And it's sort of like this really twisted love letter to everything on the wiki. It's in many ways, I would say, the opposite to 6500 because it is a fairly bleak message at the end, but it's a really good story that is, it's about the end of the world. Only the end of the world is because of the Foundation. And in this story, The Last of the Hand, it is about literally the last surviving member of the Serpent's Hand, although you get to watch, as some of the other ones. And, it is also a fairly bleak story, but it is really underrated and it's really, really well written. So I think people should go read it. Next one is not underrated, but is awesome. So ToeKing07 or ToeKing on Twitter, or the person behind
Foundation After
Midnight Radio did the fairly famous, if you are aware of what SCP is, you probably have seen somewhere these MTF codes, which are the sort of pictorial descriptions of different threats the MTFs might run into. Did something for the Wanderer's Library or the Serpent's Hand symbols. Now, in my opinion, it makes a lot more sense with the Serpent's Hand than it does the MTFs, because the MTFs are, at least can be communicated to each other, whereas the different groups of the Serpent's Hand may never meet. And so these icons would make a lot of sense to be left, around artifacts or around different books or whatever. Again, it's like a pictorial world building, effectively, just like the MTF codes, and it's just really, really cool.
For sure.
And, takes 15 seconds to look at, so go fucking look at it.
It's a picture, for God's sake. What do we got to do to get you people to read something? It's a picture. Look at the picture. You can look at a picture, right?
Go look at the wiki.
It's a fucking picture.
And then another is Artificial Dragon's Gate by Spectral Dragon. And basically, this is another GUI document from the Serpent's Hand, and I just wrote, would you like to turn a carp into a dragon? I know I would. And then The Grove of Exiles, which is, by Tech Sorcerer 2747, essentially the Serpent's Hand document on SCP-4000 or Taboo. And so, if you like 4000, and I fucking love 4000, I think this is a really interesting, different perspective. Instead of focusing on the Fae from the Foundation's perspective, the Serpent's Hand has a very different, point of view on. Anyway, we have both talked a little bit about the Serpent's Hand. Do you want to?
Well, that's too bad, because I want to stick my.
Oh yes, stick your last one in. Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about how the footnotes are almost always used to lend a humorous note to the proceedings, and one that doesn't do that because it's dealing with something deadly serious and scary is Serastes' The Black Vaults of Alagata, Serpent's Hand format, which was one of the keystones that I used when writing the Warrior Path for my part of Inevitable. So I'm just going to read quickly a paragraph from it just to give you a sense of what the Black Vaults of Alagata are according to the Serpent's Hand. The vaults of Alagata are filled with the plunder from the sacking of the library, every tome and text that the Prince of the Gallows and his demons treacherously stole. One might describe the nature of those texts as those associated with forbidden knowledge, which is a laughable claim. Knowledge is only forbidden to those not strong enough to withstand it. What is true is that the one who was hung had taken only the most powerful sources of knowledge, the secrets that have propelled seeker after seeker in search of them. The nature of the devourer Yaldabaoth. It says Boeth. Oh my god, it says Boeth. Serastes. And her destroyer angels. The 16 names of the Scarlet King, the terrible birth of the Wonder Maker, the whispered confessions of the last king of the Night Apes. Like a fly to a spider, the secrets hidden within these vaults have lured countless souls into Alagata's web. It's really spooky, and I really like it. It's a good article by Serastes. It's a good article. The Black Vaults of Alagata.
Yeah, Serastes has some good shit, and this is definitely one of them.
It's a really good article.
Yeah, this clearly is very important to your path in Inevitable.
Yeah, I saw this and I went, yeah, we're going there. This is perfect. Because I needed something that was linked with the Wanderer's Library, and I also wanted to go to Alagata, and then I came across this article that says, yeah, there's a horrible umbilical between the two places you need to go between. Oh, okay. I'll take that.
And this historic event that is would clearly be very important to the people that are involved.
Yeah, you've got the sacking of the library by Alagata, which is cool, because that's just an event that's somewhat hinted at and glossed over. And then, of course, in Moose, we actually saw the attempt at invading the library by the Foundation, which is also one of these noodle incidents. We're not quite sure how they went. Don't try to invade the Wanderer's Library. It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. Does not work out. Although, as you talked about in the Warrior Path, Alagatans were fairly successful.
Yes,
they left a pretty.
They took a lot of books and they left a big hole.
Yeah, which is this cancerous aperture.
Yeah, it was just the concept as Cerastes outlined. It was just so appealing that I had to use that, and I'm glad I did, and he was glad as well. So we're all glad here.
Yeah, so you've touched on the Serpent's Hand kind of a couple times, right? Or the Wanderer's Library, at least. I mean, because there's the Warrior, and then I know there's a mention of it in Georgian Gothic, which is part of your Password series. That also mentions Site 91.
Yeah, well, yes. Georgian Gothic is one of the tales in my Time After Time Password series, the premise of which is that my characters visit every site that I could find that was well enough established to support its own story. And I slung one GOI into each story, and because Site 91, Grigori's site in Yorkshire, England, has an occult library, it seemed like the most likely GOI to be attacking them, to liberate their stores of knowledge, would be the Serpent's Hand. So I tried to dive into the head of a Serpent's Hand operative who has worked at the Foundation for long enough to become trusted enough to pull this heist off, and the cognitive dissonance of knowing that the people who work at that site are not bad people, but also knowing that knowledge needs to be free. And just getting into that headspace made the whole thing blow past. It was one of the easiest to write in that series, and it's also the first real story in that series. And as for the Warrior Path, I had to go to the Wanderer's Library. We all decided what we were going to write. Grigori decided he was going to do a cultural piece in a specific cultural setting. Ip decided to go to all of the nexuses. Dark Stuff decided to explore one Series 1 SCP from a different angle, and I decided I'm going to as many cool places as I can come up with, which is why Grigori's Turkish city of Kayakoi is one of them, yes. And Alagada is the end point, but I had to do the Wanderer's Library because it's such a cool setting.
It's fucking amazing.
If you read the Wanderer's Library's sister site, you will see countless examples of world building. It is the most world-built area in the overall Foundation verse, next to probably Sloth's Pit. What with the fact that Ip has written like 150 things about Sloth's Pit, and several other people have actually contributed a lot to that as well. But the Wanderer's Library is a very cool location with a lot of cool characters and mini settings within it, and it was just fun to write about. So yeah, that's not so much about the Serpent's Hand, but they're interlinked, obviously, in a big way.
And that's a good segue into what I wanted to talk about, which how we're going to introduce them into Vanguard. Just a bit of a peek behind the curtain. I'm working on an article with Lizard Wizard about, if you've read Emissary, then you know that the Serpent's Hand is going to be a big part of Vanguard, because they make the most sense. If suddenly the Foundation was to say, okay, you guys have been right the whole time, what would they do about that? And my perspective is the most of them would see the writing on the wall and say, okay, well, we're going to join up, and we're going to keep you guys honest. But some of them would not. And there's going to be a significant conflict there. And basically this whole story will take place in and amongst the Wanderer's Library as a setting, because I liked it so much from your stuff, from Warrior, but then also from Of an Endless Hunt kind of goes into it as well. Because this is a place, and I talked to Rounder a bit about it beforehand to kind of nail him down on it, but this is a place where people live. There are businesses within it's not a city exactly, it's a giant endless library, but also
immense. People
live there, and there's a ramen shop that I talked about in Nobody's Looking for a Fight, and Nobody Likes to Sneak. We gotta talk about Nobody. I fucking love Nobody. Anyway.
Yeah, well, that's a GOI. Yeah. Maybe we could do a twofer with Alison Chow and Nobody.
Yeah, that's true.
The one-person GOI.
Yeah, that'd be great. And so we, kind of establishing. Oh yeah! Wow, that was really loud. I have earphones in, and I can hear that. Anyway, I live right by a highway, and it is sometimes there'll be like fucking car races on this highway at like 3 a.m., which is really fun.
California.
Yeah, we're the only people that do that. Anyway.
Yeah, only California.
Well, it does work out well here because it never snows. So,
Yes.
So yeah, we're planning on kind of delving into, based on, in a lot of ways, Of an Endless Hunt, but then also SCP-6000 a little bit, and then also Moose's stuff with Tilda Moose. Because, I find that stuff fascinating, and I kind of have always kind of been of the opinion that the Serpent's Hand is the most relatable, and yet we don't really talk about them much on the site, and I want to change that. We reference them, but it's rarely something that is from their perspective. And what a good example. Like everything, I am using Vanguard to address things that I feel like are missing on the Recon.
Well, it's a very sensible thing for them to show up, do the I told you so thing, and then try to help their way through, because in Locke's portion, the SCP portion of 6500, the Serpent's Hand is pointed out as one of the first people to go, so this is going to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
They have documents about it going way the hell back where they're like, maybe stop locking stuff up. Maybe it's going to cause everything to fall apart.
Maybe, just maybe, the impasse is the reason that the Serpent's Hand exists. Because they wanted to stop the Foundation from doing it. No, I don't know if that's true. But...
And that term that we use for the event that is 6500, the impasse, I'm pretty sure that is, according to Locke, the Serpent's Hand's term. So we're already using their term. So, which is funny because that's how the Serpent's Hand's terms are apparently universally the best ones, because everybody uses jailer, everybody uses bookburner, and everybody uses impasse.
What I like about them is that they're almost always very simplistic but evocative terms for things.
Yes, they're evocative but straightforward and direct. Yeah,
like they're not interested in being like mystical or like overly like clinical. They're just these very, like you said, straightforward. They really communicate to you what this is about without being just hokey. I guess there is a universe in which somebody would have looked at, jailer, that's hokey, but it has caught on and it makes perfect sense.
Yep.
Anyway, so I think everyone should go read all those articles, or pretend like you did and then upvote. I'm just kidding.
Just like me. As far as you know.
Anyway,
I do my homework.
I know you do.
Even when you only give me a day to do it.
You could do the homework.
That's funny.
Sorry. Anyway.
Yeah, good luck with that. So emails.
That's right. Real Surreal Sir is the person...
God, that's fun to say.
Yeah, Real Surreal Sir.
Real Surreal
is the person who wrote that article and wrote in last time, Harry. And I forget their name that they used last time. But they did note that in the beginning that you were right, that the same person. Anyway, really like
As with the fact that my jokes are always funny, I don't know if you need to indicate that when I said something I was right, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, for everyone listening, when Harry finds out that he is wrong, the world fucking cracks open, and he is
When I find out that I was
hell.
Wrong... When I find out that I was wrong, no, you move.
Let's just quote Marvel movies for the rest of the podcast. All right, really liked last week's episode.
I was obviously quoting the comic book because we're talking about Serpent's Hand and books. I wasn't quoting the movie; I was quoting the comic book.
No, whatever.
The literature.
Trust me, text. I know you could.
I don't read Marvel comics anyway, so
I do.
Go on.
Religiously. Anyway, Real Surreal Sir says really liked last week's episode. I don't know how, but I'd somehow completely missed the entire Arcadia GOI, and up until then, almost completely. I'd gone and read some articles and the hub since, but genuinely don't think I'd ever come across any of it until then. Kind of cool to get a deep dive into something completely new. As for this week's episode, excuse me, glad to see Serpent's Hand being visited, as even though it's one of the most visible and frequent organizations to pop up, it's always felt so opaque. Yep, just like we were saying earlier.
Yep.
I must have read a few dozen articles involving them at least somewhat, and still have only the vaguest idea of what they do or how they're organized, beyond tied to the Wanderer's Library and want to collect and spread knowledge of the anomalous. Especially magic, I think? Hopefully, I'll have a better understanding soon, though, once your episode drops. Can't wait. Sorry to fail you.
Soon.
Because, there isn't a lot of better answers, unfortunately. Which is fun. I think that's kind of one of the more attractive things about the Serpent's Hand is that they are everywhere and yet still fairly vague.
Yes, like a snake.
Excuse me. Do you want to read the one from Gizmo?
Yeah, I'll read the one from Gizmo. Greetings from Gizmo. The Serpents Hand are the good guys, and I'm ready to fight to defend this opinion. Well, you won't have to fight us. Nope. Normalcy is a tyrannical construct enforced without consent by a few powerful individuals. The veil is a noose with which they choke the world. They secure only themselves, contain the freedom of the oppressed, but they will not be protected from the retribution they earned. The Serpent's Hand fights the good fight. This reads like this could go on the hub right here.
Yeah.
Seriously, I'm rooting for them. I like seeing them show up in stories and doing their things, but I especially love their GOI formats. I think we agree with that as well.
Yep.
They've got cool names for things instead of plain boring numbers. It feels more like an exploration of the topic, and it allows for doubts and different theories. Yes, all the Serpents Hand GOI formats have a section called Doubt, where basically everybody goes, here's what we don't know, and then other people go, and here's what's mentioned above that might be bullshit, which is cool. That and the bickering in the footnotes is always good. Agreed. The concept of the Wanderer's Library is both fascinating at first and really scary if you think about it too much, which I try not to. Although, now that I think about it, I don't remember reading that many storylines with Serpent's Hand and characters from it, mostly just standalone stuff, or their GOI formats showing up in other stories not focused on the SH, like The Mother Who Demands One's Toes, The Deniers. Looking forward to learning more with this episode. Also, magic is cool.
Magic is cool.
Magic is cool.
Every time I talk to Gizmo, I think that he's cooler than he was before.
Yep, just ever-mounting amounts of cool.
Yep. Like, every time Gizmo makes a cool meme about one of our things, it's fucking hilarious. It's never just, like, dumb. It's always great. And also, Gizmo's, like, turning out to be not just a fan, but also a talented up-and-coming writer.
Huzzah!
Which I included their description I included their first article in the description of the last episode, and I think it's fucking hilarious and creepy at the end. Why don't you read?
Great.
Why don't you read this next one?
Oh, I guess he wants to read the last one.
I do.
Okay.
Because Randy's the best.
Everybody's the best today. This is Bryn. I am a big fan of the podcast. Me too. It has taught me a lot about the SCP universe that I was not aware of. Me too. And it has even got me to start actively reading and rating more articles. Man, I relate to this one hard. To show my love and support for the podcast, I thought I would make you all some fan art of what goes on during the break, despite my main medium being photography. Apologies to the guest that I did not draw. I did not anticipate who you are. Well, you got lucky there, didn't you? I'll post the art on Twitter after the episode you all are reading this on has aired, because I want y'all to have the first look. Well, that's lovely. I can't wait to see.
And Bryn, I did send it to Harry, so he could take a look. It's great. Thank you.
You did? When did you do that? Oh, that was fantastic. I love that. Shit, yes. I did see that. It was great.
Yeah, it was like 2 weeks ago, because we haven't recorded.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago, like 2 years ago in my brain. Yeah, that was great. Yeah. Thank you very much for that, Bryn.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Love it.
And I've talked to Bryn a few times on Twitter. They're great. Anyway, last one is from Randy, who is quickly becoming one of my favorite people in the artist community, because Randy decided to read all of Victim and then did like 3 or 4 art pieces for Victim in a row, and they're excellent. Randy says, hello, so I definitely didn't expect episode about Arcadia to take such a turn in the direction of you discussing actual games. Actually, behind the scenes, Jackal said multiple times that when he came on, we would just get the whole episode would be about 90s horror games, and so it just made perfect sense to make sure that we included that in the
yeah, there was a desperately high chance that it could just have been 2 hours about Resident Evil.
Resident Evil. That's right. And be glad that I was pressed for time and didn't go into depth about how much I fucking love Parasite Eve, because it is intense, my love for that game. It was fun.
But it was fun.
And that's all that matters. Actually, I'm writing this because I have an amazing question for you. I like it when people send in questions. It's really fun.
Me too.
Have you ever gotten emotional over an article you're writing? If yes, which one? But if not, then have you ever gotten emotional over any article on the wiki that we were reading, I assume?
Yes, presumably.
So I definitely have 2 articles that I have was very emotional about, and which is why I wrote them, which is SCP-5079 and SCP-5923. And it's probably pretty clear when you read them that those are dealing from two very different perspectives on like sort of isolation because of the pandemic. So I went from being a fairly social and busy law student and then cramming for the bar. And then right after I took the bar exam, which was 2 months of hell, I don't recommend it. I woke up to find out, oh, did you know a global pandemic is starting? What? And then I just kind of went into shutdown mode. That's also around the time of like significant civil unrest in America. For reasonable, like, I very much understand why people were very upset. I was very upset.
Yeah. And
so it was a very stressful and yet very lonely time. And so I kind of shut down in a lot of ways. And then when I came back into SCP, I did pick up my series and do other stuff. But the thing I really wanted to talk about, let's talk about the fact that like we are no longer engaging with each other very much. To some extent, we still haven't. I have friends that I've barely talked to in the last couple of years, or other than text messages.
Yeah.
And 5079 was like kind of my first discussion about that, and it is just someone desperate to connect. It is kind of a body horror ridiculous thing as well, I also like Sarcasm, so I wanted to tie something else to Sarcasm, although it really has nothing to do with Sarcasm other than like body horror. And then 5923 was almost a year later, still unemployed, still socially isolated, and looking at it from like a really different perspective of just loneliness. Not just like I want to hang out with people, but also just like that sense of like, wow, I've never spent this much time alone. I used to think that I liked alone time, and I do, but I don't like it as much as I thought.
Not this much. Yeah.
I did not realize just how social of an animal I am.
I like alone time. I don't like the alone times, which we are now living through.
That's right. My current job, most of my team is like work from home, and they're like, okay, well, you can come into the office if you want. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do that. And they're like, well, you don't have to. We have an 8:00 meeting. You can just stay home. And I'm like, no, I've seen enough of this bedroom. I don't need to spend any more time here while the sun is out. Thanks. Let me go someplace and talk to people and like go to the coffee machine and shit, because I'm losing my mind.
You're shitting in the coffee machine?
Yeah.
This is the last day you have that job.
Yeah.
This is why he doesn't have pictures of himself and links to his law practice on the YouTube videos. I understand now.
One of many reasons.
Yeah.
All right, your turn. You tell us a story.
Yeah, okay. I'll try to just do a grab bag instead, because I have so many answers to it that I don't want to give an in-depth answer. There's pretty deep personal information encoded into quite a few of the ones I've written. The Significant Other's story that I wrote, which is 23,000 words long, is a very emotional sort of combination of mental problems and relationship problems smashed in together, which I tried to give a very happy ending to, just because I thought that was nice. And one of the things that matters to me when I write a story that's long and emotional is if the ending makes me feel a little bit giddy because it's so emotional, then that's something that indicates to me that it's gone well, which also happened when I wrote The Good Work, which is a story about losing people, really. It's about loving people and losing people, which came out of SCP-5520, The Rabbit Hole, which is explicitly about losing someone who matters a lot to you. And that one, there's basically, metaphorically, blood on the page for that one. That one really hurt to get out, which is, I think, always improves it. It just makes it harder to create it. And The Woman in the Incinerator, 5616, was also very emotional for me because it's about being trapped inside fucking forever and never knowing if you're going to be able to get out, which some people, small proportion of the global population might have some sort of resonance with right now. Not a lot of people, but some people
just might. Several billion, it's fine.
And the most recent one, actually the last thing that I have posted to the wiki, 6519, The Spirit in the Sky, is literally a story about something that actually happened in my life that has emotional resonance involving not necessarily believing in life after life, but thinking it's a nice thought to imagine that the people that you've lost are somewhere else and can maybe speak to you. Not believing it at all. I have no religious beliefs or supernatural beliefs of any kind, but it's a nice intellectual exercise to imagine that there are people who are okay once they've left the veil of tears, blah, blah, blah. And so all of those were very emotional to me to write. As for reading, I think probably the one that just completely annihilated and devastated me was The Friendly Vandals' Portraits of Your Father, which of all the fucking things is about Kondraki.
Yeah.
So that should not have been emotionally effective, but unfortunately The Friendly Vandal has an absurdly high quality of prose, and it's a story about losing someone very close to you and the ways that affects you and the way that people around you help you to cope with it. And it's an immense story and very long and very, very beautiful, and some of the finest writing on the wiki, and it's also very highly rated. So yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that does that. There's all kinds of writing on here that affects you, because emotionally effective stuff is something that everybody eventually wants to write when they write, even if laughter is just an emotional effect. But in terms of catharsis, so making you feel upset and then making you feel better for having been upset, it's an important function of literature, and it's one of the signs that our writing community is so mature and developed that it's able to generate stuff that can actually make you cry, even if they're talking about ridiculous characters who used to be famous for carrying fencing swords and shotguns around and shooting at each other. It's evolved.
Yeah, the whole like humor and catharsis thing, I didn't even think about it because I thought emotional, so sad, but the entire reason I write Victim and have brought up this stuff is because of my sense of humor and my absolute rage at the world.
Yeah. Yeah, that's emotion. It's working anger into vicious parody is a legitimate emotional response in writing.
Look, people are like, what's the secret of Victim? And the secret is I'm mad.
The secret is I'm so fucking angry.
I am really fucking angry all the time. Not like
so
at people,
angry.
but like just at like the fucking world and injustice, and like being an American citizen, realizing that sucks.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I mean that's where 3809 came from too, which is probably one of my favorite articles I've written. Is about a fucking angry, yet romantically obsessed satellite. Because the way that I think that it's fun to deal with shit I'm mad about is to make, darkly humorous stories about them.
I agree. Oh, what I also wanted to mention just quickly as well is one of the most unbelievably underrated things on the site, which is essentially a novella by Dr. Gears called The Dread Mother.
Oh, yeah.
Which is also a really deeply descriptive and deeply emotional family anomalous creepypasta story. It's very long and it's just fantastic, and it's rated at 32, which is missing a digit at least.
Yeah.
Dread Mother. That's another very emotional one.
I think it's 35,000 words or something, right?
It's immense.
Yeah.
Gears occasionally just shows up and drops a bomb, and that's what this one was just like. Hello, here we go.
Here's a novella I wrote. It is really good. I finally have worked my way through it. It's terrific.
It's incredible because Gears is certainly among the best of us. So that's another really good one. It is so underrated that it hurts. Of course, I have to always say, what one did you think was emotional? Well, the one that had long enough to become emotional, because they took the goddamn time to develop it to the point where it could devastate you.
Yeah, so I think that's going to do it for us.
Yep.
Twitter is @simcreate. SIMCREAT. My personal Twitter is @GregoryCarpent. Also, if you're interested, I have been making Twitter about Vikander Need, only hilariously Twitter assigned me the @NeedVikander. but I've been doing like weird little videos and bizarre like in character tweets, which has been fucking so much fun. People will send me something or like say something in a meeting, and then I immediately just pull out my phone and start writing.
It's so good.
It's the end of the first quarter of 2022. Anyway, why don't you give out your Twitter?
At Harry Blank SCP.
And our email is at simplycreativepeople. Simplycreativepeople@gmail.com. So please do keep emailing us. I really do love the questions. This is such a wide-ranging subject, and we have both read and written a lot. So, it would be fun to talk more about that kind of stuff. Anyway, I would not be surprised if next time we are talking about possibly Wilson's or Sharp Punching Center, depending on who is available.
All cops are bastards.
ACAB indeed.